Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into a really powerful, ancient Buddhist parable about how we navigate the absolute heaviest of human emotions. The text we're looking at details this incredible journey of a woman who is grappling with something we literally all have to face eventually. But, we rarely know how to actually handle it. This isn't just some old story. It's honestly a masterclass in human psychology and emotional resilience. So, here's a question for you. How do we survive a grief that feels entirely our own? It's a profoundly universal question, and it perfectly sets the emotional stakes for the historical journey we're about to take. Because think about it, when tragedy strikes, our immediate instinct is almost always to feel completely isolated. We feel like we're the only ones carrying this crushing burden, and that exact feeling is the whole foundation of our source text today.
Part 1. Unbearable Loss and Denial. The story of Kisa Gautama.
Right, so our source text starts off with Gautama Buddha. He's traveling from village to village, sharing his teachings on peace and wisdom. And during these travels, he comes across Kisa Gautami. Now, she is a mother carrying her young son who had, tragically, just passed away. She was absolutely heartbroken, completely consumed by the sheer rawness of her denial. Begging for what is essentially an impossible cure, she's crying out, "Give me a medicine that will bring my son back." She literally went from house to house in her village in total desperation. The villagers felt incredibly sorry for her, but they obviously couldn't help. Finally, just acting out of deep pity, someone pointed her toward the Buddha, kind of hoping he might have some sort of answer for her agonizing pain.
Moving on to Part 2. The Buddha's Unusual Condition. A Cure with a Catch. Okay, so when Kisa Gautami runs up to the Buddha crying out for help, he actually doesn't turn her away. He looks at her kindly and offers to help bring her son back. But he assigns her this seemingly simple yet ultimately impossible quest. Step 1, bring a handful of mustard seeds. That's an incredibly common household item. Sounds easy, right? Well, then came Step 2. She had to ensure that these seeds came from a house where no one had ever died. By setting this specific condition, the Buddha was gently putting her on a path of self-discovery, rather than just arguing with her in her state of denial.
Part 3. The Search for the Seed. Knocking on every door.
Filled with this sudden, massive surge of hope, she truly believed she finally had the miraculous cure right within her reach. So she sets off knocking on doors. But her desperate inquiry was immediately met with a massive reality check. It was heartbreaking. She would eagerly ask, "Has anyone in this family ever died?" only to get these very grounding responses like, "Yes, my grandfather died many years ago." The source notes that initially, she just thought, well, surely no one has died in the next house, and she'd just move on. But she was about to face a deeply recurring truth.
And you can really see how this agonizing realization just kept building throughout the day. In the morning, she asked that very first house. By the afternoon, she was visiting family after family, door after door, and everywhere she went, the answer was exactly the same. The text specifically points out that in every single family she visited, a father, a mother, a sister, or a friend had died. This realization is slowly mounting as the hours pass by, leading right into the evening where she ultimately returned with empty hands.
Part 4. A Universal Realization. Returning empty-handed.
So, as evening falls, this profound shift in her perspective takes place. When she finally returns to the Buddha, she makes this quiet, devastating, but incredibly illuminating admission. She says, "I could not find a single house where no one had died." The sheer exhaustion of her day had completely given way to clarity. By stepping into the homes of her neighbors, she finally recognized the deeply shared reality of loss. She wasn't isolated anymore. She realized she was part of this vast, human community of grief. In response to this, the Buddha offered some really gentle wisdom. He said, "Just as all rivers flow to the sea, all living beings must one day face death." The text explains that his teaching here is absolutely profound. Suffering becomes significantly lighter when we understand that it's simply a part of life. He didn't offer a magic trick, he offered perspective. He showed her that her pain was literally woven into the very fabric of existence.
Part 5. Finding Peace Through Acceptance. Wisdom over a Miracle.
Because of this harsh but honestly beautiful lesson, Kisa Gautami finally accepted the truth. The source text is actually very careful to note here that she still loved her son deeply. Her love didn't just vanish, but her heart finally calmed, and she actually thanked the Buddha for his profound wisdom instead of that impossible miracle. So, distilling all this down, we learned that loss is undeniably a universal part of life. Every single family experiences sadness at some point. But crucially, shared suffering is lighter. When we realize we aren't alone, the burden shifts. And finally, understanding this truth brings the exact peace and strength needed to move forward. The text concludes by telling us that from that day on, Kisa Gotami lived a life of kindness and peace, guided entirely by these teachings.
I want to leave you with this final thought. If everyone you meet has known loss, how does that change the way you treat them today? Because this ancient story isn't just about a woman finding peace thousands of years ago. It is a literal blueprint for empathy in our modern daily lives. When we remember that every single person behind every door is carrying their own invisible grief, it fundamentally shifts how we connect with one another. Keep this question in mind as you go about your day, and thank you so much for walking through this explainer with me.